Hey everyone, what is up? Happy New Year. We are officially in 2021. We have made it. Congratulations. And in the new year, if you're like a lot of people, if you're like most people, you're using this as an opportunity to come up with some new goals and to come up with some new things that you may want to do or try, to come up with some new ideas. You are thinking through how to make the most of this year and even how to maybe make the most of things you didn't do last year as you're reflecting on that and things you want to launch into. I know I do that every year. I treat it as a fresh start, as a new step towards something, maybe a new hobby, a new practice, a new discipline. It could be a spiritual goal or whatever, but you may have some of those in mind as well. But the reality is, if you're also like most people, like me, and you also experience the difficulty of maintaining those goals. It's easy to start, they're hard to maintain, and certainly hard to see through to the end. And part of that reason is just we kind of try it out and then one day it slips and we're like, oh, I'll get back to it tomorrow. And then all of a sudden it slips twice. And then all of a sudden it's 3 times and it just snowballs. And before you know it, it's like the habit's broken, the discipline's broken. We don't really try anymore. Change is an incredibly hard and difficult thing. To create a new habit, to break an old habit, to maintain a discipline that you're trying to build, it's hard. It's a hard thing. The idea of change is not foreign to the Bible, and the idea of change is not distant from Jesus. In fact, one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible is about a guy named Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19. And this guy, Zacchaeus, lives in this city, this town of Jericho, and he is well known because he is a tax collector. And not just that, he's a chief tax collector. So he's kind of like on the top of the tax collector pyramid, and he oversees the whole program. And as a tax collector, your job was going house to house, door to door, and collecting money from people on behalf of the government. But that was a problem because the government at this time was Rome. And Rome are oppressors to Israel. They have come in, they have conquered Israel, they are oppressing the Jews. And so Rome needs taxes, but they don't send Romans to collect the money. They actually would hire Jewish people to become tax collectors and go collect money from other Jewish people on behalf of this government that has just conquered them. And so these tax collectors were like middlemen that nobody liked. The Jewish people didn't like them because they were taking money from fellow Jews. And the Romans didn't like them because they don't care about them. They just conquered these people. They need them to collect taxes, but they're replaceable. Zacchaeus is one of these middlemen, these people in between these two groups, and nobody likes tax collectors. And so you can imagine he's lonely. He doesn't feel wanted. He doesn't feel like he belongs. He probably doesn't feel loved, but he has a lot of money. He's very wealthy. He's made a lot of money from doing this. And so he probably kind of looks out for number one. He might have a big ego. He kind of runs the streets, so to speak. He's a chief tax collector. And if there was ever an argument in the Bible for someone who probably is not going to change, it might be Zacchaeus. Think about it. He's rich, like really well off. He is kind of looking out for himself. Rome doesn't really love him. His countrymen and sisters don't really love him. And so he's kind of looking out for himself. He's got a lot of pride there. He's looking out for number one, that type of thing. And he seems to kind of have an inflated view of himself. There seems to be a little bit of arrogance on his part, running ahead in front of the crowds and climbing a tree, and maybe Jesus will see me up here. I want the best view, those type of things. But Jesus comes into Jericho, and Zacchaeus hears about it. And as the crowds rush, Zacchaeus cuts in front. He climbs the tree. He wants the best seat in the house. And Jesus stops at the tree and looks up, calls him by name, Zacchaeus. And he says, I'm coming to your house today. Zacchaeus hurries down the tree, joyfully receives Jesus. He's excited to have this VIP over to his house. Everyone else is grumbling and complaining. Him? You're choosing him? That dude? Why would you go to his house, man? Do you know who he is? You ruined our lives. I mean, think about people that you know in real life. People with a lot of money, people who are self-made, people who nobody likes, people who have to look out for themselves, people who are very proud, people who kind of fit that MO that Zacchaeus has. it's hard to think about them and say, you know what? I bet they would be a person who joyfully receives Jesus and has their heart changed and transformed by him. Like, if we're really honest, usually we look at those people and we're like, dude, there's no hope there. They're not going to change. The gospel's not going to change them. They're stuck in their ways. Their trust is in money. Their hope is in themselves. They're not going to change. And Zacchaeus is this guy who Jesus invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house, and they go and they have dinner together. And that night, Zacchaeus spends looking into the eyes of the most compassionate man in all of history. We don't know what they said, but we do know after dinner, this is Luke chapter 19, verse 8. After dinner, Zacchaeus stood up and said to Jesus, Lord, Lord, half of my goods I'll immediately give to the poor, and if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will restore it fourfold. So immediately he repents of all this wrong and stealing and cheating people out of money that he's done. I will give half of what I own to the poor. I mean, just immediately. And if I've done anything wrong, if I've defrauded anyone, I'll restore it fourfold. Now, the Old Testament rule or the Old Testament law in the book of Leviticus is if you've robbed or if you've cheated someone, you need to restore it 120%. Everything that you took plus 20% on top of that. Zacchaeus blows 120% out of the water and says, I will restore it 400%. I'll restore it fourfold. Here's this guy who was rich and self-made and isolated and no one liked him and he's got a lot of pride and he's kind of not the candidate you would look at and say, I bet that dude would change if Jesus entered his life. And Jesus entered his life, and immediately in this one night with Jesus, he repents of his ways, gives half of his goods to the poor, and restores what he's taken and done wrong 400%. And Jesus looks at him and says, today salvation has come to this house, a clear indicator that this is genuine. So as we think about this new year and we think about all the changes we want to make, may we be reminded that it's not a program that will truly change us. It's not some mantra. It's not something we say enough times. It's not some discipline that through sheer willpower we get into that will actually lead to heart change. The only thing that can lead us to heart change is Jesus. Having a true and personal encounter with the person of Jesus is what changes us from the inside out. This year in 2021, with all the changes that you might be trying to make, and I wish you well in all of those, may your hearts be changed through encountering Jesus. Love you guys. Have a great year.